Good evening. Thanks for taking the time to come to attend this hearing this evening. We always like to hear from people, and in spite of what people may think, we appreciate your comments and we appreciate your investing your time in coming to talk with us this evening. This is the information session regarding the application for a permit to install for the Buckeye Biogas Biosolid Storage Facility in Wayne County's Canaan Township. My name is Darla Peel. I'm a Public Information Officer with Ohio EPA. I've spoken with a number of you. My job is to serve as sort of a liaison between technical staff and the public, and to gather information for you so you don't have to try to track down staff. I am a public involvement coordinator. So I'm going to moderate this evening's meeting. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to provide information about the proposed project, to respond to as many questions as possible during the time allotted, which is 30 minutes, and to gather comments about the proposed permit to install. With me on the panel this evening are Chad Ferguson, Chris Moody, and Rich Blasek, all with the Division of Surface Water in the Northeast District Office in Twinsburg. Chad will give a presentation in just a few minutes. Also present are Christopher Weiss, another Public Information Officer. He was at the registration table. He has another role later. And Media Coordinator Dina Pierce. So if you are a media person, please seek out Dina Pierce. The format for this evening's meeting will be a presentation followed by a 30-minute Q&A session. That will be followed by the hearing, and that's the time when you share your comments and we listen. To ensure that as many questions as possible or receive a response this evening, your questions are going to be grouped by topic and read from the yellow question cards that you've already submitted. In addition to the question cards available on the registration table, we can make them available to you if something comes up during the course of the evening. Any unanswered written questions will be responded to in writing in the response to comments, and I'll give you more information about what that is later as well. Before we continue, I'd like to remind the audience that if anyone has brought in Class A or B biosolids samples to the meeting to make a point or for illustrative purposes, please take them out of the building. They are not permitted to be in here. There could be spills. We're not allowed to have more than water in here. If you don't do so, and biosolids are observed, then the Ohio EPA is required by the university to call campus police. This is not personal, but it's a matter of public safety for them. I'm going to turn things over to Chad now. Please calm down so we can speak.
Good evening, everyone. How's the volume in the back? Not good. So there's a little bit, that seems a little bit better. How's that? Okay, how about the glare off my head? Okay, nothing I can do about that. Thank you again for coming this evening. I do want to reiterate what Darla said about that. We do appreciate people coming out, engaging their government, engaging your agencies, and we appreciate your feedback. So of course tonight you have an opportunity to both ask questions and make statements in public testimony as a part of the record in this public hearing. So while Darla has largely covered this, I'll just hit it quickly again. The purpose of the evening is to discuss the applicant's request for a permit to install. Forgive me if I slip into government acronym speak, but you'll hear me say PTI, possibly other panel members say PTI. That's what we're talking about here, the permit to install. At this point, of course, it's just an application for a proposed project, but all of those terms are used generally interchangeably. Of course, we'll also gather your comments this evening regarding the application as it stands now, as well as comments and questions that you have about the potential impacts to waters of the state. So the panel tonight, including myself, are all with the Division of Surface Water. The permit under consideration is being reviewed within the Division of Surface Water, and that's why the emphasis there on potential impacts to waters of the state, in case you're wondering. Here's the acronym I promised. PTI application details. Most of you already know this, of course. The applicant is Buckeye Biogas, LLC. The project is for a proposed storage lagoon of treated biosolids. It would be called the WILES Lagoon, a proposed 10 million gallon clay-lined lagoon. The description is for Class B biosolids. I apologize, that's kind of a technical term, but in both federal and state rules, there are important differences between so-called Class A biosolids and Class B biosolids. They're both suitable for agricultural use and indeed have a pretty widespread agricultural use in the state of Ohio and also in the nation. Nonetheless, this facility is just for Class B biosolids as proposed. Of course, the location you all know better than me. It's just a little bit east of Friendsville Road on the north side of East Pleasant Home Road, Wayne County, Canaan Township. So let's talk a little bit about some of the details of the application itself. The material that is proposed to be stored at this facility are treated biosolids that are coming from the Buckeye Biogas Anaerobic Digester. Show of hands, how many people have seen the Buckeye Biogas facility over on Seacrest? Okay, so many of you. All right. There are a number of different feedstocks that are taken into this facility that have high amounts of organic molecules in them. So these would be food wastes, biosolids from wastewater treatment plants. So many of those biosolids will have already been treated one time before they're incorporated or accepted as feedstock in this anaerobic digester. Of course, the second part of this company, or this facility's name, biogas, I want to say just a bit about that. What that reactor or digester does over on Seacrest is it's full of microorganisms. Those commonly known as bacteria. Those microorganisms break down the feedstocks that are introduced into that reactor. And just as we exhale carbon dioxide when we breathe, these microbes exhale methane, or CH4. This is chemically equivalent to natural gas. Of course, natural gas is flammable. This facility burns that natural gas, and then they have a genset on site that allows them to generate electricity. So from the standpoint of what they're doing, that's the essential part of their process. On the tail end of their process is what we call effluent. And this is the material that's proposed as the principal material for the project at the Wiles Lagoon. Importantly, that effluent, when it leaves this facility or any of our other regulated facilities, or at least facilities that are permitted by us, that material has to be performance tested in terms of the bacterial levels that are present, as well as metal concentrations. And those standards are set by the US EPA in 40 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 503, also in the Ohio Administrative Code 3745, Chapter 40. I'm sure many of you have become more familiar with those regulations, perhaps, than you ever thought you might. But suffice to say that this is a highly regulated material. So again, the feedstock for Buckeye Biogas is sewage sludge. By the way, sewage sludge and biosolids are interchangeable from a regulatory standpoint. One's not better than the other, one's not unregulated, and the other one is regulated. They are exactly synonymous as far as regulators are concerned. In terms of raw material feedstock, and when I say raw, I simply mean untreated, that is taken over at Buckeye Biogas. You would see food waste and food scraps. Indeed, even the College of Worcester, for example, sends some of their food scraps to that facility. Also fats, oils, and greases. That sounds a little bit ominous, but again, we're talking about wholly in the context of food that is produced for human consumption. So fats and oils from fryers, for example, from restaurants. Once that material has gotten to the end of its useful life and can't be used in the production of human food anymore, it can be used for microbe food in anaerobic digesters. I apologize, I skipped over that term a second ago. The facility over on Seacrest is an anaerobic digester, and what that means, just as in aerobic means oxygen or breathing, anaerobic means in the absence of oxygen, okay? So it's just that those bacteria are adapted to live in that type of environment. So sewage sludge will go into that reactor, also food waste, fats, oils, grease, and any other feedstocks that are allowed in our rules. But the important point here is that those feedstocks have to be approved by us. So if they're not already listed on there, and there are some others listed that are not here, but that are not a part of this application, meaning there are other organic materials that could be used as feedstock, but anything that's not a part of our rules has to be approved by us in what's called a non-traditional feedstock. and we take an evaluation of that. We look at the potential benefits to the facility, potential risks to public health and the environment before we approve any non-traditional feedstocks. At this time, Buckeye Biogas does not accept and does not have any approved for their use. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the PTI or the PTI application for this project. A number of questions that we have gotten over the last few weeks and couple of months have to do with other permits. Indeed, there are other permits that are related to this proposed project. The first couple are related to wetlands. So this project does not have any what are called jurisdictional wetlands because there are no navigable waters that are associated with this state. So the Army Corps of Engineers does not need to issue a permit under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. However, because there is a small isolated wetland, and the isolated wetland, that's actually, I'll put that in quotes because that's a regulatory term, there is a delineated isolated wetland on site, and because of that, we have to have staff that evaluate the application for essentially the destruction of this wetland in service of the project, but then we have rules that require that those losses of wetlands be mitigated. And while this part of our review is still underway, I can tell you a couple of things because I know some things, I know these things are on your mind. One, it is permissible for trees to be removed at the site. I know there's been a fair amount of logging activity over in the Wiles woods. And as long as that logging has not taken place inside of the delineated wetlands, that is considered a permissible activity. I will say that we have staff, again, that are coming back out to the site to confirm that none of that logging occurred inside the wetland. So I know some of you believe that it did or that it negatively impacted the wetland. If that's true, we will find that out. Regardless, as long as the boundary of the wetlands, what we call the delineation of the wetland, is largely confirmed by Ohio EPA staff, the company has already paid for the mitigation of the loss of those wetlands, even though the project is not approved, through the Stream and Wetlands Foundation. I believe they did a 2.5 acre to 1 acre replacement, and the amount of acreage over there that we're talking about is very small. It's even hard to imagine. 0.039 acres, so about a third of a tenth of an acre. We also have a nexus with what's called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, more commonly known as the NPDES program. Now, initially, this company applied for an NPDES permit in addition to the PTI because they expected to take biosolids from multiple facilities. That is, not only from the Buckeye Biogas facility on Seacrest, but from other places as well. And indeed, if they did that, they would have to get an NPDES permit. However, they decided that they're only going to accept material from Buckeye Biogas at this point, and because Buckeye Biogas already has an NPDES permit, the Wiles project as proposed, meaning only taking material from Buckeye Biogas, does not have to get a second NPDES permit. And if that changes, the company, as they go through this process, if they decide once again that they would like to take material from multiple facilities, they'll be required to get an NPDES permit. And we'll do a process not unlike this all over again. There's also a stormwater permit that is required, and that permit has already been issued. But again, I want to stress, all of these things are necessary, and all of these things are related to each other, but they're also independent of each other. So as I said, the company's already paid for the mitigation of the loss of the wetlands. It may be that this PTI gets denied, and if that's the case, then that mitigation will have been for naught. Or they've gone through the trouble of getting a stormwater permit. We've evaluated their application and issued that. This PTI is no more likely to be issued on account of that. Each of these things has to be done in turn, okay? So I don't want you to come away from this slide in particular thinking that, oh, well, they've already got this permit, it sounds like the wetlands are already done, this must be a done deal. That's not true, and please notice I keep referring to this as a proposed project because indeed, that is where we are with it. And I think at this time, by the way, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we are still understanding that the company wants to do material only from Buckeye. Okay, thank you. I apologize, this is kind of a bird's eye view, a little hard to read, but you can see that yellow thumbtack right there in the middle. You all know where you live, right? So this is where the project is. There's not really much more to say about that. This is a pretty important slide, and I think that this may be news to some of you. I know at least a handful of you will be familiar with this information. So again, this is a biosolids storage lagoon. It kind of begs the question, why are we storing biosolids? Ultimately, this material, as is allowed by law, can be land applied to farm fields when those fields have been authorized by the agency to receive that kind of material. And again, I told you this is a highly regulated material in both Class A and Class B. That's true. Those fields have to be registered with us and authorized for that application of treated biosolids. Signage is necessary to indicate to people who might see activity on these fields that they wouldn't necessarily know what's going on out there. Excuse me. They might detect odors during application of biosolids, or perhaps in a couple or 3 days afterwards. But then after that, the odors abate, and you might not have even known that this activity is taking place. So what you're looking at here is the essential extent of land application authorizations as they exist in the vicinity of the proposed project today. And what we're talking about is about 1,000 acres of land that is authorized for the land application of biosolids. Now I know this surprises many of you, and I've talked to several of you about this. The fortunate thing, and I think it's fair to call it a fortunate thing, is that we have not gotten complaints about odors. Of course, we have pig farms and chicken farms and dairy lagoons and such like that in the area also, so it's not uncommon I'm from the country myself, so it's not uncommon to smell things in the country. But we haven't gotten complaints in recent years, to my knowledge, or ever for that matter, about any of the land applications in this area. So that's probably a positive thing that's been going on, at least in the area, and was not causing a nuisance. So that's an important point to register, I suppose. And also in terms of other impacts or threats to public health and the environment, particularly waters of the state. That's the purpose of those authorizations. We want to know where this material is going, generally how much of it is going, and so forth. There are also limitations in the rules that restrict an applicator in terms of time of year when they can apply, and also timing with regard to the harvesting of whatever food crops are being grown on those fields. The point of all of this is that there's a significant amount, define significant how you will, but there's a significant amount of land application of biosolids going on in the vicinity of this project right now. And by the way, in information that Chris pulled together for me, the earliest authorization that we have on record for this type of activity goes back to 1990. So I don't want to say that it's necessarily been even across years since 1990. I don't have that information at my fingertips, but certainly it's been going on for many, many years out there. Okay, so you're all here to gain a better understanding of how this process works and what you can do to influence it. And a very important part of what I want to impart to you tonight is essentially what I'm going to call the limits of our authority, okay? We probably have less authority to deny a project than many of you would believe. There are only certain things that we can take into account for a project that, as the application is submitted, appears to comply with our rules and with our laws, okay? That's a very important point that will probably come up even in the question and answer session. So what are those things that we are allowed to consider? Because indeed there are things we are not allowed to consider as well. What are the things we are allowed to consider? Okay, engineering plans and design criteria. This is pretty intuitive, right? We see detailed engineering, professional engineer level drawings of these projects. And indeed, they have to be stamped and signed by a registered professional engineer who is registered with the state of Ohio. Applications must not only appear to be sound with regard to the engineering, they must also comply with all applicable laws, rules, and regulations. Of course, in the Division of Surface Water, we're paying particular attention to make sure that they comply with ORC 6111. We also see that they conform with Ohio EPA guidelines and policies. In this case, because we do not have rules per se on design criteria for lagoons, We are looking to a sister agency in the NRCS. This is the Natural Resource Conservation Service, a federal agricultural entity. They have guidelines on waste storage facilities, that is manure lagoons, right? Operation and maintenance information. So what type of material do they propose to accept? How much of it do they propose to accept, and such like that. Of course, groundwater protection. I know this is on the mind of many of you, and rightfully so. It's on our mind as well. In fact, right now, the facility is working their way through comments that our hydrogeologists have made. Our hydrogeologists raised a number of different questions about making sure that there is adequate separation between existing groundwater underneath the proposed lagoon, and to make sure that there is a good fit between their proposed design and that distance to groundwater. So that review is ongoing right now. I know some of you have seen a fair amount of activity at the site recently as additional groundwater monitoring wells are being put in, and as the company and Ohio EPA hydrogeologists attempt to drill down, no pun intended, on this question. Of course, we're allowed to consider the importance of nuisance odors. Nuisance odors are prohibited. Now, nuisance odors can be a little bit tricky to define. There's nothing wrong with saying that. If you smell something, it's rare, it's infrequent, it's light, that's probably not a nuisance odor. It's when something really begins to disturb your quality of life that we would begin to think about that in terms of a nuisance. So we can think about that, and we are thinking about that. Existing land application authorizations. I've already shown you those. And then, of course, citizen input. And again, that's why you're all here, and many of you will go on record later tonight. Things that we cannot consider. Some of this is not going to make some of you happy, I'm afraid. We cannot consider local land use and zoning. That's completely outside of our domain. Road traffic and noise. The need or the popularity of the project. I think it's fair to say that this may not be a popular project as it is proposed currently. The potential or perceived impacts to property values, and whether or not material is coming from out of the county or out of the state, material that would be used at the facility. It's not that we don't care about these things, and if I can convey one thing to you tonight, I want to convey this to you. It's not that we don't care about these things. We are human beings. We are citizens ourselves. Of course, we are public servants. It's not that we don't care about these things. It's that we utterly lack the authority in rule and law, which we are charged to effect, to act on these things, okay? Now, that's not to say that you're registering your concerns about these items in testimony later is meaningless. It is certainly not. I just want to try to get you thinking about what we can think about in terms of whether or not we're going to recommend to the director that he approve the PTI or whether he not, all right? We can't consider these items right here. Okay, so fortunately my presentation is almost over. So what will happen next is we will be accepting questions from the yellow cards, and then the panel will attempt to answer those for you. After that, you will be able to make statements on the record as a part of the public hearing. In terms of the processing of the PTI itself, so again, at this time, this is an important procedural thing, I think, for some of you. At this time, we are waiting on additional information from the company about groundwater protections. Once we have that information, and our own staff hydrogeologists have had a chance to review it, they will either sign off on it, and then Surface Water can continue to proceed with the processing of the application, or our hydrogeologists will come back to us and say, we need yet more information. And there may be several revisions to this. I can't forecast that, okay? In any case, our hydrogeologists are working on that now. Once that is done, the division will recommend to the director whether he approve or deny the PTI. He will either issue or deny the PTI. Of course, before that happens, your comments will be taken into account, as well as those from any other interested parties. And this is an important thing to note. There are two things I want to note about this last bullet. This PTI, whether it's issued or denied, is what we call in regulatory terms a final action of the director. And that's counterintuitive because it's not final, actually. So you just have to accept that that's what it's called, a final action of the director. If it is issued, it may be appealed to what's called the Environmental Review Appeals Commission. And they are a basically court-like entity that will evaluate the basis of the appeal. They will evaluate whether or not we followed the process accordingly and whether or not we followed our own rules and laws. They will make sure that we did not overstep our authority in either approving or denying the PTI. And so this is available to you even if the PTI is approved. Now, importantly, that does not stop the company from proceeding with their project. Once they have the permit to install, they may commence to installing the project as they apply to do. That won't stop anyone from filing an appeal. Now, this is an important thing to note also, and we noted this with the leadership in our pre-meeting 2 weeks ago. The company can also appeal. So if the director were to deny the PTI, the company can appeal to ERAC and say that the agency didn't follow its own process, it didn't follow its own rules and laws, they overstepped their authority by denying this PTI. So it's a two-way street. It's available to both the applicant and it's also available to people who would oppose the PTI, okay? So in terms of comments, many of you will have already filled out blue cards. Thank you for that. Of course, you can actually make verbal testimony as well. If you have a neighbor or a family member who was not able to be here tonight, they're more than welcome to mail written comments to us, and the address is here. And I believe everyone has a copy of the slides as they're up here. So, okay, thank you. So you have a copy of the address there. Please feel free to disseminate that amongst your family and friends and cohorts. You can also email comments to us at the email address here. I would ask, because you can imagine we have actions like this pending in many places in both the district and in the state, please include the permit application number in any correspondence that you have. Or I suppose even if you were to call in, it would be helpful. And that's 1211412. It's right there for you on the last slide of your handouts. Importantly, the public comment period will end April 24th. Is that 1 week from today? Yep. 1 week from today. So you've got a little bit of time. If you're not able to stay around later to make your statement on the record, you can still get your statement in, and you have a little bit of time for that. Let's see here. Okay, I think that's all I have. Shall I?
Just the stand as well.
I did not turn it off. Got it.
We're going to share the microphones this evening. We have just a couple here. So, Christopher Weiss, who was at the table when you were coming in and helped you sign in, took your question cards and he put them into categories because a lot of you have the same questions, which makes a lot of sense. And we've been hearing that during the months that we've been working with people and interacting. So what I'm going to do is paraphrase the questions and somebody on the panel will respond to your questions. Okay? This first question is, are there other similar facilities in Ohio? This is about facilities in general. Are there other similar facilities in Ohio? How many are there? And how are they like the one in Wayne County?
Chris, do you want to take that one?
As far as the number of facilities in Ohio that are regulated by us, can everyone hear me? All right. The number of facilities in Ohio right now for anaerobic digesters that are similar to the Buckeye Bioenergy, I believe we're up to, in Northeast Ohio, I think around 5. I know there is 10. We're up to 10 total facilities. As far as anaerobic storage lagoons, that number is a little more difficult to quantify. I know in Northeast Ohio we don't have too many of them. I know the City of Worcester has 3 storage lagoons at the wastewater treatment facility, 2 of which are actually used for storing biosolids. One is used primarily for the storage of residuals from the drinking water plant.
Okay. The next set of questions has to do with odors, and people are asking whether the trees will really help reduce the odors that leave the site, and how will that happen? What will that mean to them? Pardon? Sorry. It's hard to tell from here how loud it is actually, because it bounces back to us. I said there are a number of people who've asked whether the trees would really have an impact on the amount of odors that are released from the site. So who can address that?
Take that. I have not been to the site since the logging took place. What has been reported to me is that the band of trees left around the perimeter of the woods is thin, as it was described to me. So I would say that it remains to be seen whether the trees would assist with that or not. I will say that any amount of vegetation out there acts as a certain windbreak. I would say, if anything, and we talked about this in the pre-meeting with leadership, if anything, the trees provide probably a visual, not probably, they provide a visual buffer to the facility. Most of these typically are out in the open, and so I think some of the thinking was that the trees may help with odors, and they also help to conceal the site, if you will.
Okay, thanks, Chad. There is another question related to odors that I'm going to add, and that is that this person wrote that he understands that there are severe odors at similar facilities, but that there are advanced technologies to help control these odors that have not been used regularly. Can we compel the use of advanced technology?
The answer to that is yes, we can, as it is necessary. So I mentioned earlier in my presentation that nuisance odors are prohibited. I will say that in terms of prevention, what we have asked the company to do, obviously we don't have any odor complaints at this time because the facility is not built, but we have asked the company for their responses in terms of how they would deal with any odor mitigation at this particular facility. At some of the anaerobic digesters that this company operates, they do have odor mitigating technologies that they deploy. I will say that in terms of silver bullets to odor abatement, there's not really a silver bullet per se. There are a number of different ways that you can help to control odors. Probably the most obvious one would be, in this case, that the lagoon be covered. But at this time, once again, while we have asked the company to contemplate odors and the prevention of nuisance odors, at this time we don't have any nuisance odors. And so in terms of prescribing that at this stage, that seems a bit premature, but we do have things that they can do, and there are things that we can require them to do if there are odors after the facility is built, and indeed those odors constitute a public nuisance. So I guess I want to say, this is not really related to the question, but inherent in whether an odor is a nuisance is the amount of response that the agency gets. And when we get complaints for odors, whether it be at this proposed facility or at any other existing facilities, we send inspectors to the site, first of all to determine, if they can, the source of the odors. We also make sure that they are performing housekeeping, operations, and maintenance as they're expected to do in their permits. And forgive me, I don't know if I said this or not, the inspector is also there to determine whether or not he or she is getting odors off-site. And oftentimes they're not getting odors off-site. I mean, odors can be a little bit tricky. They're transient. Of course, winds change direction. I've been told by a few that there are prevailing winds, directionally prevailing winds out here. Okay, I don't know that to be the case, but I've been told that. So sometimes our inspectors are able to affirm odors off-site, and sometimes they're not. But we do respond to complaints, and the more complaints there are, the more responses we get, and obviously that is all part and parcel of figuring out whether or not this is just a passing annoyance or whether this is actually affecting quality of life.
What's been done in the history of these other places that have violations, odor violations? What's been done?
Okay. Can I take that?
Take this question, but we're going to ask you not to ask questions from the floor, but he'll do your question.
You're not answering the questions, though.
So, look, I'm going to repeat your question and you tell me if it's essentially what you want to know. The question is, what have we done at other facilities where there have been odor complaints and complaints about odor nuisances? Is that right?
Violations.
And violations, yes, okay. Sounds like there's a question coming up about that. So the first line of defense, if you will, after we send an inspector to a facility, let me back up one step.
I understand all that, but, and not sound whatever, but has anything been done for the odor?
Yes. So this company was taken previously into enforcement for a number of violations, all of which are part of the public record, a number of which I understand many of you are familiar with, to include nuisance odors. What resulted was what are called director's final findings and orders. These are unilateral orders that our director, as a governor's appointee, can issue. They have the full force and effect of law. What those orders were there to effect was the implementation, design, development, and implementation of what's called an odor mitigation plan. Odor mitigation plan. That particular plan required ultimately required any number of housekeeping measures at these sites. So for example, making sure that hatches were closed, making sure that feedstocks were not being left on the solids receiving pad, making sure that storage tanks were not venting, making sure that the biofilter, which is there to remove odors from gases, is being maintained and is operating. Things like this. So for example, if we got a complaint, an inspector went to one of these facilities that was bound by the orders, finds odors off-site and finds that some of these violations had occurred, that inspector could issue an NOV. After we issue an undefined number of NOVs, we don't simply, just like you don't go to jail when you get one speeding ticket, right? You kind of get multiple opportunities to correct your behavior. We operate the same way with regulated entities. If they are out of compliance, if they're creating a nuisance, if they begin to generate a pattern of NOVs, we can take them into enforcement. We did that previously. We generated the orders that I just described, and when we did that, odors went down across facilities. Now, did they disappear entirely? No. Our objective was to reduce the frequency and the magnitude of those odors, okay? So, to answer your question shortly, yes, we have enforced on this company when there have been odors in the past. We will do so again if there are odors that are associated with this project.
If it affected the area's livelihood because of the snow,
so that
you're not following through.
I mean, let me just reiterate. When we had odors that we regarded as a nuisance, we took enforcement. When we took enforcement, the result, because of changes, operational changes at the company, because of those changes, complaints went down across facilities. That is the response that we want to see that directly relates to the quality of life you're talking about there. If complaints go down because odors are going down, that's the desired outcome. And we would do that again if it turned out to be a problem. But this is an important thing to remember. There's a lot of things to worry about. But we don't have any nuisance odors at this company, at this facility yet, at this facility, because it's not been built. But where we have addressed them, complaints went down, and I think that's a pretty important metric of whether or not our response was appropriate and whether or not the company was doing the right thing. Complaints went down by measure.
I'm sorry, we can't entertain questions from the floor. We only have 30 minutes for this portion. It's terrible. Someone had a follow-up question.
Talking to the mic.
I am speaking to the mic. The mic was turned down because it was thin. Please let me finish, ma'am. You cannot interrupt. There was a follow-up question during which someone asked whether the tree roots would grow into the lagoon and cause the liner, basically, and cause leakage.
So I'll take part of this question and then I'll defer another part of it to Rich Blasek. This is a perfect example of why it's important for us to engage the public and why it's important for the public to engage us. This was something that we had not contemplated, again, frankly, because these facilities tend to be in open areas without a lot of woody growth around. I mean, typically we have mowed berms. If you think about the lagoons, for example, down at Worcester, what used to be Worcester Renewable Energy and is now run by the city. So thank you to whoever brought that up during our leadership meeting. Rich, do you want to take that?
As Chad indicated, that was something brought up at the meeting for us. We're still looking into that. Typically, you know, the root system follows the canopy system of the tree. So these trees are going to be off away from the lagoon in order for them to do construction. So I do not foresee where the canopy is going to be over top of the lagoon in the liner area. But we will keep that in mind as we're reviewing the PTI and moving forward with this.
The next question has to do with truck traffic and waste on the roads. Basically, how many trucks per day and how heavy will they be and what hours of the day? So how many trucks per day on the road, how heavy will they be, and what are the hours of they'll be in operation?
Chris, do you want to talk about drag out?
In regards to the drag out possibility, that right now we have a 150 by 150 foot entranceway that's gravelled, and it's supposed to be sloped towards the lagoon, so if there's any potential drag out, it would be draining back into the lagoon.
I'm going to add something to that. I used to work in the Division of Air Pollution Control. Again, there's two parts to this question. One is about the truck traffic. You might remember from my slide, this is one of those things that we do not regulate. We do not have the authority to address truck traffic anyway. With regard to drag out on the roads, however, we do, to some degree anyhow. And so if that drag out results in particulates that are generating a lot of dust on the roadways that wasn't there previously, our Division of Air Pollution Control can get involved and assess whether or not permit and control measures are necessary for controlling that. And that could turn out to be the case, or it might not turn out to be the case. This is a 10 million gallon lagoon. The tanker trucks that haul biosolids haul about 6,000 gallons. But in terms of the total number of trucks per day, we're probably talking something on the order of 6 trucks a day, 8 trucks a day, something like that.
It's going to depend entirely on production at the facility.
Let me say something about that. So I detected some skepticism in the audience at that. Let me take that head on. Let me take that head on. At this time, because this is very important, at this time, material is only coming from Buckeye Biogas. That facility is only capable of generating so much material. So while you may be thinking in your mind that 10 million gallons is an awful lot of liquid, I should say that I think it is as well, it is not like that facility on Seacrest Road can generate anywhere near that number on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Oh, so I just want to make sure that that's perfectly clear. At this point, there exists a very definite and physical bottleneck in the Buckeye Biogas anaerobic digester. It's only capable of generating so much effluent per day. And if I had to guess, I would say that that would probably be in the order of half a dozen trucks a day, something like that. So did you want to... The only place that the WILES Lagoon, as proposed, is only accepting... There are two important points here. The project as proposed is only accepting material from Buckeye Biogas. Period. At this time. That's what... thank you. I hear you. I cannot read the future. Their application... Their application is for feedstock material coming from one facility, and that's Buckeye Biogas.
We're going to move on with the next set of questions. This has to do with we have until 7 o'clock to finish these questions, that's why I want to move forward. Liner of the, people are asking about, saying that the water table there is high now, and they're wondering why there is just a clay liner, which some consider not to be a liner at all, in the pit, and what else could be done.
So I alluded to this in my presentation. At this time, our hydrogeologists are evaluating the material, the additional material that we have called for from the facility. It may be that a clay liner is determined to be insufficient, or it may be that a clay liner is determined to be sufficient. The dairy manure lagoons in the vicinity, the pig manure lagoons in the vicinity, any of the agricultural manure lagoons in this area will have almost certainly clay liners. But again, if the geology is such that we believe that a synthetic liner, that is a plastic, more impermeable liner, is necessary to protect groundwater, then that's what we'll require. It's just that that has not been determined at this time, but it is possible.
People have concerns about well water and how they can be assured that their well water will not be contaminated. What can be done to prevent that or to monitor that?
Could you hear that question in the back? Okay. What I would say to that, I guess I would point to the earlier question and my answer to that. The hydrogeologists that we have on staff are evaluating this work in the division of drinking and groundwater. So it is their job to make sure that groundwater is not going to be impacted by this project. In terms of the second part of the question, and I've talked to a few of you personally about this, what I would say is I would consider having your wells tested. We do not test wells as a matter of course in these types of projects, but just for your own use. I mean, for your own edification, I suppose. I would want to, if I was living here, I would want to know what was in my well, regardless of this project. And as far as this project is concerned, if you tested your well now, and you find out that your well is clean, and there were to be a groundwater impact going on into the future, well, you would at least have some information from before the project was built. The other thing is you might find that your well is clean now, the project goes in, you decide to test your well every year thereafter, and that you find no impacts at all to your well. So that is also entirely possible, and I can tell you again, that is absolutely the objective of our hydrogeologists, to make sure that there are not impacts to groundwater. We don't want to approve projects that are going to create threats to public health and the environment. And what I said to the leadership group meeting when we met, that review, that extra review that we initiated is a normal part of our process. It wasn't because one of you came to us and said, what about my well? It was because our reviewers looked at the plan and said, I need more information so that I can have the confidence to know that this project is not going to impact groundwater, okay? So, all I have for that.
Okay, I have to move forward, I'm sorry. You can answer what we'd like for you to do is this, when we come to the time to do the hearing, I'd like for those of you who have questions that are not answered, and we're not going to get to all of these in this evening in this period that we have. However, I'd like for you to come to the microphone and ask your questions on the record, because then we'll respond to them in writing and you will have that in front of you. We're going to do the same with any questions that weren't responded to here. You'll receive an in-writing response to those. So it's not that I'm ignoring you. I have to move forward at this time to try to get to the other topics as much as possible, but please come forward and ask it on the record. In just a few minutes we'll go to the hearing, and we want to hear what you have to say and your questions. And there's a week to provide public comments still, so I'll talk more about that later though. Okay, the next and probably the last question we'll be able to get to is, have there been research on the health effects of sludge, and what kind of results have those revealed?
There has been research on the health effects of sludge, and what I can say about, I'll say a couple of things about that. One is that the findings are mixed. The rules that we have today have, in Ohio, in Chapter 40 of 3745 of the Ohio Administrative Code, those were adopted from Chapter 40, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 503. Those rules governing the beneficial use of biosolids were established by the US EPA in the 90s. I don't know if there's, do you have a year, Chris?
February 93.
February of 93. And I guess there are two things to take away from that. There are those who think that those rules now are outdated. There certainly have been questions about that and whether or not we need to update those rules. When I say we, I mean US EPA, and then the states in turn deciding whether they're going to update accordingly. There are also people who say, we've had these rules for several decades now, and we do not see negative impacts to public health and the environment. I mean, there were 1,000 Ohioans killed in cars last year for example. That we know, that's a very measurable thing, and we can make some inferences about the risk of that type of activity. There are 0 people that became sick, to our knowledge. There are 0 people who died because of their exposure to biosolids and so forth. Now, it's an imperfect world. Does it mean that biosolids rules are perfect? No, I doubt that very much. However, looking at the exposures that we've had, the amount of time that we've had, you've seen on my slide earlier how much material, at least in an aerial extent, has been applied in the vicinity of this project over the since 1990. And yet we haven't had complaints, we haven't had negative impacts to health, we haven't had wells contaminated, etc. So I guess what I would say to that is, while I understand the worry and I understand the fear of the unknown, the fact that this material is as widely used as it is, and as widely used geographically as it is, so both in time and space, and we don't see the effects to the impacts to public health and the environment, means that these rules may be doing their job in protecting public health and the environment. And I submit to you that many of us would say that they indeed are.
Okay, that will mark the end of the question and answer session. As I said, I have all of the question cards here. Some of them are grouped together, but we will be responding to these in writing to you. Anyone who signed in, if we have your mailing address or your email address, will receive the responses to all of these questions, so everyone will get the whole collection. So we're going to move into the hearing portion of this evening's meeting. I need to read a speech into the record, and I appreciate that you'll bear with me. The purpose of this public hearing is to accept comments on the official record regarding an application for a permit to install for a biosolids storage facility in Wayne County's Canaan Township. Buckeye Biogas LLC proposes to build a 10 million gallon storage lagoon in Canaan Township, east of the intersection of Friendsville and Pleasant Home Roads, to store anaerobically digested biosolids from the company's Worcester facility. The treated biosolids would later be land applied on Ohio EPA approved sites. When determining whether to issue or deny a permit, Ohio EPA cannot consider the need or popularity, local land use and zoning, property value impact, road traffic, noise, out-of-county or out-of-state waste. Excuse me. Ohio EPA published a public notice to announce the hearing and public comment period regarding the permit to install application in newspapers, as well as Ohio EPA's Weekly Review, which is a publication that lists by county all agency activities and actions taking place in the state of Ohio. Local media also have been provided with significant information about this action. Written and oral comments received as a part of the official record will be reviewed by Ohio EPA. To be included in the official record, written comments must be received by Ohio EPA by the close of business April 24th, 2018. That's 1 week from today. Comments received after this date may be considered as time and circumstance permit, but will not be a part of the official record for this hearing. Written comments can be filed with us tonight or submitted to Ohio EPA, Division of Surface Water, Permits Processing Unit, P.O. Box 1049, Columbus, Ohio, 43216-1049, or email to epa.dswcomments@epa.ohio.gov. Please be sure to include PTI permit number 1211412 on each comment sent. This information is provided in the agenda and in the presentation handout, so you don't have to worry about trying to keep up with that. It's important to know that equal consideration is given to all written and all verbal comments. So if you submit comments in writing, they carry just as much weight as anything you say here this evening. Questions and comments made during the public hearing will be responded to in a document known as a response to comments. The Director of Ohio EPA will consider all comments prior to any further action on the permit to install application. Final actions of the Director are appealable to the Environmental Review Appeals Commission, also known as ERAC. The board is separate from Ohio EPA and reviews cases in accordance with Ohio's environmental laws and rules. Any ERAC decision is appealable to the Franklin County Court of Appeals. Any order of the Court of Appeals is appealable to the Supreme Court of Ohio. Information about how to file an appeal with ERAC is available at the registration table. Each person may testify only once this evening and will be given 3 minutes to do so. If you have a question that was not addressed during the question and answer period, please ask it on the record and it will be addressed within the responsiveness summary. We only have to use the facility until 9 p.m. and want to make the most of everyone's time, so anyone who is uncomfortable speaking in front of a crowd, anyone who needs to leave early, or anyone who just wants to get their testimony over with can join Christopher Weiss, whom you saw bringing the cards up here, in a space across the hall. If you go out the back of the auditorium there, directly across the hall, there's a room with a court reporter and Christopher Weiss, and they will take your testimony there. So you're welcome to do that at any time. Otherwise, you'll be called upon to provide testimony in the order in which the blue hearing cards were received. So this evening, the first person to provide testimony will be Bill Erdos. E-R-D-O-Z. Thank you, sir. Please come to the, let me finish. Please step to the microphone and state and spell your name for the record, and then proceed with your testimony. Thank you, sir.
My name is William Erdos, E-R-D-O-S. I apologize. Facing the wrong way.
That's okay.
My name is William Erdos, E-R-D-O-S. How about now? Is this better? I'm sorry?
There you go. It's good.
Is this all right? Yes, I have a couple of questions. Mr. Ferguson, you indicated that this permit is only for materials coming out of Buckeye Biogas. And the amount of sludge, sewage that is generated by Buckeye Biogas is how much? I'd like to know what that capacity is that's currently being produced.
We can't respond to questions during testimony, sir. This is strictly a listening period, so if you ask that question, it will be responded to in writing. But this portion, the public hearing, is like a court hearing. We can only listen to what you have to say.
All right.
Okay? Thank you.
All right. I did not indicate that I wanted to present testimony. I was asking a question. I apparently filled out the wrong card.
I understand, but this is the hearing, so we will respond to your question in writing. We also will be around for a while after if you want to just chat with people. You're welcome to do that.
All right, and I have a follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ferguson indicated that the amount that's produced by Buckeye Biogas is very, very insignificant compared to the capacity of the proposed lagoon. The proposed lagoon is 10 million gallons. Buckeye Biogas produces substantially less than that. My question is, why build a 10 million gallon lagoon if it is permitted only to come out of Buckeye Biogas?
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, the next person whose name I have on a hearing card is Carol Erdos. Great, okay, thank you. We'll just say that you passed then. Next, I have Dan Armstrong. Dan, will you come forward? Okay. Next is Dan Berkwit. Mr. Berkwit is at the back, so he'll take a moment. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Dan Berkwit, B-E-R-K-W-I-T-T. The reason I'm here is I don't live in your area.
Church, please face the microphone, sir. Thank you.
This is more directed towards them.
I know,
you
but
people,
we
understand that you all are doing your job as the EPA. You're doing what you can do. The issue is QUASAR. You guys have not mentioned the name QUASAR since you've been here. I dealt with QUASAR from the Worcester water plant. The smell that they had there was atrocious. I turned around, ended up going to city council 2 or 3 times, and what ended up happening was the city of Worcester bought them out, and they're gone. Since they've left, there is no smell, whether from the lagoon or from their biodigester. Now, what's to say, like this gentleman said earlier, they're building a 10 million gallon lagoon. They go ahead and approve this permit. What guarantee can these people here as citizens have that not a year later, well, now we're going to bring it from DuPont, we're going to bring it from this place and that place? Because what they did in Worcester, QUASAR lied, not just to me, to my face. They turned around, they lied to city council, they lied to the Worcester water plant.
Please let him speak. We understand you agree with me.
And what happened was, they were like, well, it's not our fault. They tried to blame the Worcester water plant. It had nothing to do with the water plant, because it is running right now, and it's running just fine. But who's to say they're not going to turn around and start bringing this stuff in at midnight, like they did at the Worcester water plant? I know that you guys say that you can regulate what they bring. How do you know what they bring? They did it at Worcester. Who's to say they're not going to do it to these people? And that's not fair to them. I know you have a job to do, and I understand regulations, your hands are tied to a certain aspect. I get all that. I'm a Class 3 water supply operator, so I understand the issue you all are having, but QUASAR is not to be trusted. I'm sorry, I could not trust them as far as I could spit on them. And that's up to you guys, but these people, this is their homes. This is where they live. And you can only do so much, but when it comes to QUASAR, their track record, I mean, how far is the Worcester water plant from Seacrest? I haven't been to Seacrest, so I don't know if there's a smell emitting from there. But when they turn around and start bringing stuff from other places, don't tell you guys, these people, the smell, it sticks to your clothes. We had a barbecue. We had to go to Apple Creek for my house. I live a quarter mile up the street. So for them to say trees are going to stop the smell, no, it's not. I had a dozen houses in between me and that water plant, and it was so bad. I ended up, like I said, going to city council, on the record there, talking to the Worcester water plant superintendent, everybody. I felt like I even talked to some of you gentlemen about it. And finally, something got done about it. These people are going to have to go through that issue because QUASAR wants to put a 10 million gallon lagoon in that Seacrest can't even come close to producing. You know, and I feel for you guys. You're doing the right thing. You got to stand up for yourselves because it's not their fault. They're doing their job. But QUASAR, look in the Akron Beacon Journal, look in the Daily
Record. Wrap up your
Record.
remarks, sir. Okay.
Say again?
Please wrap up your remarks, your time.
You
Yes.
can look in the Daily Record, Akron Beacon Journal, Worcester City Council meetings, and they'll tell you everything about QUASAR. One of their gentlemen that used to run QUASAR, now, quote unquote, I can't say any names from what I've heard, is a consultant and helps the city of Worcester. Doesn't work for QUASAR no more because of what they did.
Okay, it's time. Thank you.
I wish you all the best, I really do.
Thank you, Dan. Next up is David Bell. Mr. Bell, if you'll come forward. State and spell your name for the record, sir.
My name is Dave Bell. I speak this evening as counsel to the group Canaan Residents Against Pollution. We have prepared written comments on the PTI application that's the basis for this hearing, and we will submit that this evening. I do not propose to read all 15 pages, just a couple of comments. I would note that as a matter of public health, I did not bring any Class A or Class B biosolids tonight. I would point out that QUASAR proposes to put 10 million gallons of that stuff across the street from my clients. I would identify tonight several ways in which the proposed permit fails to meet applicable legal standards and has to be denied. QUASAR has no right to pollute groundwater. In contrast, the residents have a constitutional right to their groundwater. An amendment to the Ohio Constitution from 2008 provides that a property owner has an interest in the use of the groundwater underlying that property. The state does not have the power to take that right away, and so it is a constitutional imperative that whatever happens in the permit process, that groundwater is protected, and as proposed, this permit cannot be issued. Second, odors. The regulations explicitly require that the proposed project cannot create noxious odors. You've talked about that. You do have hundreds of complaints about odors everywhere QUASAR operates. You don't need to wait for odors to prescribe requirements to prevent them. You know they're going to be there. You can put those requirements into the permit as it is issued. Our written comments lay out a series of steps that need to be required in any permit that is issued, including precise control over the source of sludges, atomized odor control systems around the pond, and other steps. Third, I use Ohio EPA's wonderful website to look up documents, and I searched for the notices of violation issued to QUASAR over the last 3 years. I got 89 hits. A couple of those are duplicates, but a lot of them have 3, 4, 5, 6 violations each. This is not a small number of violations. Despite that history, and despite statutory penalties of up to $25,000 per day per violation, $97,000 for federal violations, we found no indication that QUASAR has ever paid a fine. We would ask that EPA refer these continued compliance failures for appropriate enforcement. QUASAR appears to have obliterated the wetlands that were on the project site. Prior to the receipt of the wetlands permit that QUASAR knew it needed and applied for, that looks to me like a deliberate violation and should be enforced accordingly. Finally, this project lacks an air permit. As explained in more detail in our written comments, the proposed project would necessarily have maximum potential air emissions far exceeding the threshold for requiring an air permit. Yet no air permit has even been applied for, let alone issued. The fact that there's no smokestack does not matter. Under 3745-3102, air permits are required for any source that has the potential to emit more than de minimis amounts of air contaminants. Ponds are routinely permitted under the air regs, and this one should be no exception. In summary, this project cannot, under Ohio regulations, be approved as has been proposed by QUASAR. The Canaan Residents Against Pollution ask that Ohio EPA continue to be in contact with us so we can continue to monitor the progress of the agency's decision process on this proposed lagoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. The next person who signed a card to testify is Hope Ream. Ms. Ream, are you? There she is.
To save time, why don't you have 3 or 4 people line up at once?
This is the process for doing this, ma'am. Hope, if you'll state and spell your name for the record.
Hope Ream, R-E-A-M. He mentioned about the violations, and which I also did find. I know back in January 12th of 2017, the village of Sheffield, they had 200 complaints that was sent to you guys from the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office had filed a lawsuit against them. Also, there were other violations on February 23rd of 2013. Fairfield County, where there was the lagoon was overflowing with biosolids. Numerous cracks and holes. Large amounts of plastics. Shredded utensils, bottle caps, and other manufacturing items. Trucks leading biosolids all over the ground, and they had a fence that was surround the lagoon, but it had 2 openings. They went back again on February 7th, or not February 7th, I'm sorry. They went back again to inspect it to see if it was fixed. It was not, so they had another notice of violation. I guess my biggest problem is, why do you all wait until something happens before you can do anything? I'm a fear for the people and their water, their health, their breathing, because, you know, the elderly, kids, you know, is there going to be a fence put around it? Or, you know, there's kids around this area, so, you know, are they going to be able to get into the lagoon? That's my biggest concern.
Thank you, Ms. Ream. Raise your hand. It's kind of tough to see from up here. And I will give you an opportunity to come forward and speak. Yes, sir. In the stripes. just hand the card to the gentleman here at the desk. And if you'll state and spell your name for the record, please.
My name is Charles Danchik, D-A-N-C-H-I-K. And I'll be really, really brief. A number of the questions that I submitted earlier are the ones that you answered about drag out and what's going to be done about odors, some of those situations. And my concern that I want to bring up is that every single one of the answers deal with what happens after the fact. And there's no, lost my words. Preventative, it's all reactive, not proactive. That's what I was looking for. Every single answer dealt with a reactive solution, and that allows them to do what they want, put in the lagoon, and then deal with fines and whatnot that are just sort of a slap on the wrist for a company of this size. Really would like to see some sort of proactive solution.
All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? If there is, please raise your hand so that I can see it. In the back, if you'll come forward.
How many of you on stage would move next to a lagoon?
Sir, we can't respond. You can come to, you can ask this on the record, but we can't respond to questions as we indicated.
Thank you.
Does someone in the back want to provide testimony? Yes, he's come forward. You don't have to, just come forward, that's fine. You'll just state your name and spell it, please.
My name is Patricia Harding, and I live in Sterling, Ohio.
Your last name is spelled, Ms. Harding?
H-A-R-D-I-N-G.
Thank you.
I hear what everybody's saying, and I totally agree with that. I think one of the big issues also is the fact that human waste is a problem. As populations grow, and we happen to live in farm country, so people who live in the city, I mean, if you had, how would the Cleveland Metro Parks like to have a 10 million gallon open pit, so their runners and their joggers and their bikers and the families want to have picnics or whatever, it's when they start spreading just even manure. I mean, my grandchildren don't like to go outside. Family members come outside, and yes, it goes away, but it's also the pathogens, the airborne, the mosquitoes, the flies, the crust that you're talking about. Every time they bring and dump another load, it's going to break that crust. So it's going to constantly keep going. I mean, just the saturation, the ground can only take so much. And it's proven in other states that just manure alone, the saturation, it's like a sponge. The ground is like a sponge. It's only going to take so much, and it's going to have to go through. When that ground gets filled with all of this stuff that you're saying, it's gonna, where's it gonna go? Where's it gonna go? We're gonna have health issues. I have a well, and I test my well. It's $300 and some every time I test it in order to test for all of the little things, not just iron and things, for all of the different pesticides, herbicides, everything else, arsenic, I mean, all those things. So, I mean, we're polluting the ground, then the farmers are gonna spread this stuff, and they're gonna use it as manure and fertilizer, and it's going to have pharmaceuticals, lead, everything else, and you're going to bring it in from other states, other cities, other towns. If you're talking about our community, that's one thing, but to bring it in from all the other states, and you have no idea where it's going to be coming from, and that's wrong. You know, hospitals, nursing homes, or medications. I mean, we take for granted when we flush our toilets that it goes away. We don't worry about it. But what happens when you're in the city, you don't worry about it, but because we live in the country, we're almost being penalized because there's open air, there's open ground that you can spread it. I mean, Washington, D.C., all these cities, where does all that stuff go? They don't want it in their cities. How many people who live in the cities want to entertain their families, to sit out on their decks or by their pools? We won't. You want to have family picnics and say people come out and want to eat and they're going to be smelling this stuff? I mean, it's just, and the health risks. I mean, it's just, I just think it's ignorant. I think that we have to look further ahead and not have open pits, but actually do something to get rid of the waste, because it's going to get worse. As populations grow, as cities grow, and developments happen, it's going to be a problem, and it's always going to end up on the farms. It's always going to end up on the open fields, and it's going to end up leaching into our food sources. It's proven that it's gone into the cow's milk, because they're putting it on the fields, on the crops are being fed to the cattle are eating whatever nutrients are coming up out of the ground, and all this waste, and it's this vicious cycle. Then you start getting increases in cancer, and I paint portraits of children who have passed away from illness and donate them. There's a lot of them that have cancer, and they have no idea where it's come from, but it comes from the water and the food that we eat. What we bring into our bodies is what we, and it's just totally wrong. I think the whole purpose is that people have to look at another way of dealing with the waste. Waste from hospitals, people, everything, companies that produces waste. And by spreading it on the fields isn't the answer. And putting open lagoons that can bring in mosquitoes and flies and all this other stuff that's gonna, you know, I mean, it's just endless when you start thinking about it. And I just think it's totally ignorant for people to think that this is a solution to get rid of waste. It's not. It has to be something else developed, because it's only going to get worse as populations and as farmlands get developed. It's just going to be a total mess. So I think it has to be addressed as what's going to happen down the road, even in the future, for my children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, because it's going to be a problem. And I don't want to be eating sewage. I mean, okay.
Thanks, Ms. Harden. If you'll just state and spell your name for the record, please.
I'm Stan Carmody, C-A-R-M-O-N-Y. I'd just like to state that Carmody Farms have been in business since about 1895. We have won an award from the Farm Bureau for Neighbor of the Year. I will never sell my neighbors down the road for financial gain. I will never. Neighbors down the road, and you can ask neighbors here, you can ask neighbors, the campground people, Carmody Farms is not spread manure. When they ask us not to, they come to us and ask us when they're going to have a large crowd of people come in. We respect our neighbors. Our neighborhood works together, and it's very sad we have one person that has to sell us down the road.
Kelly Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R. That is my father, and we have been good citizens to this community, and this is not a farming issue. This lagoon is going to give farmers a bad name. It's not what farmers do. This is not how farmers act. And my parents have been honest and respectful in this community, and we ask others to do the same back. That's all we ask. And it's sad that in this reality, in this world, that that's not happening. You know, this county is #1 in cows in the state. In 2010, we were ranked 17th in the nation of cows per square mile. Why does this county need more waste? We have enough. We need to create a program where maybe dairy farmers, pig farmers can work together with grain farmers, and we can share that manure. We don't need any more, and we definitely don't need biosolids. So it makes me so upset when I hear somebody tell me that this lagoon is the exact same as what my parents have. Or that the fact I'm fighting this, or my parents oppose this, is that we're hurting other farmers, or that we're going to open up Pandora's box to, you know, damage farmers' reputation. We're not doing that. This lagoon is doing that.
If you'll state and spell your name, please.
Shelley Brighton Booker. It's B-R-I-T-E-N B-U-C-H-E-R. And I'm going to face you in a minute, but I want to thank you all. I moved down here from the city. I'm a transplant. My husband and I moved down here about 15, 16 years ago. I've always wanted to live in the country. I've always wanted to live on a farm. I love these people, and I love what's going on here today. My question is, you couldn't answer this question before. I know you can't answer it now. You're telling us to get our wells checked. $300 and some to get our wells checked. So now you're telling us, get it checked, okay, fine. What's going to happen when we get it checked in a year or two, and you said that you can't tell us what's going to happen if these tree roots happen to break the clay foundation or the clay liner? You can't tell us what's going to happen then. Okay, so we check our well water in 2 or 3 years and it's contaminated. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to stand up and protect us then? Are you going to say, well, your well water was clean before this went in. Now 2 and 3 years later, we can test our wells and they're polluted and it's the only water we have. What are you going to do for us then? How are you going to protect us then? Thank you. I'm sorry, and I did have one other point. Odors are subjective. You say that, okay, maybe it smells, but it's subjective. It might not smell bad to you guys, but it stinks to high heaven to us. And we have to sit here and smell that the rest of our lives. We're a community. We fight for each other. I've learned that, and I love that about us down here. And I don't want to see this pond. This pond is 2.5 miles from my home, but the creek that runs through it runs behind my home. It's going, if it leaks, it's going to get into our well and my neighbor's wells. It's going to get into my water. And we have to deal with that. I didn't move from the city down here to know that this is happening. And I know you can't respond, but again, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for welcoming us to your community. And I'm proud to stand up here today and say that I'm part of your community and to fight for this. Thank you. Thank you.
Someone back here had their hand up. If you'll get ready to come forward. State and spell your name, sir.
My name is Robert Craybill.
I live in your last name,
K-R-A-B-I-L-L.
Great.
I live in Worcester. I live down where QUASAR was dumping their stuff at the Worcester City water treatment plant. And then there's EnviroClean. And now you got the lagoon. What is it about Wayne County that these people want to come down and experiment? And this is all it is an experiment. You have a history in Wayne County, and I'll end it at that. So this isn't the first time that somebody's coming to Wayne County and try to do this stuff. Lengthy legal battle ensued. Supposedly Worcester won out. I know some people who worked at QUASAR. It was a messy situation. And I don't know who was at fault, but it cost, again, millions of dollars if they paid, I don't know. But Worcester runs their own plant now, supposedly.
It doesn't smell.
It still smells a little. But it was horrible. My mom was about a half mile up the road. It was horrible. Nothing was ever done. The same thing until shit hit the fan. Literally. ATI is a research for QUASAR. So is there wonder why QUASAR is in Wayne County? It's an easy research to see how this stuff is done. My parents had a well in Creston. We sold a house. The water around here is not that good anyhow. There's nothing. They shut my house down, Dominion or East Ohio, I forget who it was. Luckily, we had free gas from the wells across the road. Because they shut our house down, we called the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. They say there's a problem in Medina and Wayne County on the water. And we also called the Creston Fire Department. I did, the guy who had the wells. They said, there's problems. So there you go. It just seems like Worcester and Wayne County, this is a good place for them to experiment because they got their research lab sitting right here on this problem. So That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There was a lady waiting who came, I'm sorry, there was a lady who had her hand up earlier.
Okay, I'll just stay down here.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. If you'll state and spell your name, ma'am.
I'm Susan Robinson, R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N. I don't like to tell people this. I have CLL. Do you know what CLL is? It is chronic lymphocytic leukemia. I will have it for life. One of the main causes is environment, farming, pesticides, chemicals, others. I have farm property all the way around me. I'm in remission right now. I may never get it again. I don't want to risk that. If you guys are the EPA, Environmental Protection, please protect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. If you'll state and spell your name, sir.
Yeah, my name is Ron Jarvis, J-A-R-V-I-S. We're the campground that Stan Carmody was talking about. My wife and I own Meadow Lake Park. My parents bought that park in 1986 from Bob and Nina Yarnell, which I'm sure a lot of people in here know them too. And if Stan Carmody said one true thing, he has been the best neighbor that anybody could ask for ever in trying to do this. Never any problems, any holidays, anything like that. And imagine for a moment, we had the gentleman that came in, thank you very much to him also, who came in from the Worcester Water Treatment Plant and was telling about how he couldn't even have a barbecue in his backyard because it clung to people's clothes. How am I supposed to run a campground with that kind of odor less than a mile away from my campground? My parents came in and go ahead, thank you. My parents came in 1986 and bought that campground and ran it. My sister lived there and ran it for nearly 20 years. Some of you probably knew her too. That she got sick and had bad health, and it took her about 3 years to die. The campground went downhill in that amount of time. She couldn't get out and work with it. She was taken advantage of by some other people, and it became a blighted area, and I'll be the first one to admit that. My wife and I came down here in 2005, and we have worked tirelessly for that 13 years trying to make that place a beautiful place again, and I think we've succeeded. We've made it a beautiful place again. I didn't get a nickel out of that place for the first 7 years we worked it. I worked for free, my wife worked for free. Every nickel I could put my hand on, every nickel that came in through that gate went right back into that campground to try to restore it to the beautiful place it once was. Now, after all of that, unnameable amounts of money, hours of our time, a section of our life that will never get replaced, I could be looking at this point at complete financial ruination. That I won't be able to sell a campsite. If you can't go outside and even have a barbecue in your backyard, you're not going to want to go camping next to that. I'm looking at complete financial ruination, a waste of my last 13 years, let alone a waste of the 20 years of my family operating this. And it's just, what is there for me? What is there for somebody like me who has a business, has tried to run a business? I've had great neighbors. My neighbors, since I've been there, and for my sister, have been nothing but supportive of us. What is there left for me then? It's just, oh gee, too bad. Let's put up another PowerPoint slide talking about what you cannot do anything about. And let me point out one more thing. Let me point out one other thing that's my takeaway from today, and that I understood very quickly as this meeting started. One of the first things you said was preliminating, before he said, well, there's nothing really says there's anything bad in this stuff. We don't have any scientific studies saying this is any bad in this stuff. And one of the first things you said is if anybody brought a pint jar of this in this room, in the same room with me, I'm calling the cops. I will call the police. If you get this anywhere near me, I'm calling the cops and have you hauled out. Yet the next guy up says there's nothing provable wrong with it. How does that work? Thank you.
All right. Any other person who would like to provide testimony? Is there somebody way at the back? I think I see a hand waving.
Come on down.
It's coming. Please state and spell your name.
My name is George Barner.
And spell your last name, please.
B-A-R-N-E-R. I had already testified across the hall, but I'd like to testify in front of everybody.
You can only testify once, sir. I'm sorry, that's the rule. It's the rule, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to in front of everybody.
Excuse me, this is what the rule is for the hearing. I have no control over that, but you can submit comments in writing. We cannot allow you to speak more than once. It's clearly stated. I'm sorry, but it's the
I just
rule for
wanted
the
to
hearing.
make it clear in front of everybody why I did it across the hall, because I didn't know if I'd get a chance here.
I understand. Please state and spell your name, sir.
Ron Walton.
Thank you.
W-A-L-T-O-N. As of the 29th of June, my wife and I will have lived in the same house on Friendsville Road for 49 years. I think that pretty much makes us permanent residents. But I do want to say this. It's a shame that we have one company, one man, is going to profit out of this whole thing when the rest of us are all going to be losers. In the way of family quality life, and I know you people say you can't do anything about this, but still you have to take it into consideration that our property values are going to plummet. I already know of one person that I spoke with that wanted to refinance their property. They spoke to a loan officer and said, where you live, your property, you are so close that your property is already devalued probably 30 to 40%. People, that's a lot of money, an awful lot of money. My wife and I, and you people too, have worked hard for what you have. And it's a crying shame that we have one company and one man that's going to profit out of this, and all the rest of us are going to lose our backsides. And Mr. Carmody, I want to thank you ever so much for standing up to the community the way you do. And I also know that all the other farmers in this area do the same, because I know just about every one of them. The wife and I have been there 49 years. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If you'll state and spell your name for the record.
Mary Metz, M-E-T-Z.
Thank you.
My husband is 4th generation to live on the farm that adjoins this wonderful lagoon. I have a couple of issues. Number one is the fact of the amount of deception that has come from day one from your side of the table. This was kept very quiet for several months until finally the news leaked out into the community what the intentions were for this property. A few weeks prior to my being knowledgeable of this, Mr. Weil invited my husband and I into our adjoining woods to designate boundary lines so that he could log his portion of the woods without disturbing anything on our side of the line. Mr. Weil was most accommodating in saying, I realize that you folks have a wood-burning stove. You are welcome to any and all of the treetops that are left behind. We spent nearly an hour talking with Mr. Weil, even reminiscing his grandparents and my husband's grandparents' history in the community. He never once mentioned, by the way, your property is going to be greatly devalued because I'm putting in this wonderful lagoon that only I will be profiting from. And then he dared to turn around and report to people that no one in the community has reached out to him to hear his side of the story. He had every opportunity to share his side of the story and chose not to. The deception from day one has put you on the defensive side of this, because if we can't believe you or trust you with the very beginning of this, why should we believe anything else you have to say to us? You tell us there's not a real big issue with the clay liner. We happen to have a pond on our side of the road that is clay lined. All it takes is a little creature this big, called a crayfish, to decide that he's going to burrow a little hole in there and our pond leaks. You tell me that this isn't going to happen in this lagoon? And by the way, any of you that would choose to want to live next door to this, I'll give you my phone number. I might have property to put on the market. Last week, my husband and I went to the auditor's office and spoke with a woman there who informed us. We said to her, we understand our property is going to drop in value. When will you be out to reappraise this so that our taxes will go down? Oh, it doesn't work that way, people. They will not be out. They will do a study to determine over the course of 5 or 6 years what the market value for your property will end up being. Then they may come out and do a reappraisal. In 5 or 6 years, you're going to continue paying the same high tax rates for what? So that Mr. Weil can get his way, one person who benefits, and the rest of us in this room who suffer and pay the consequences for one man's selfish motivations. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, you can come forward. Please state and spell your name.
My name is Tim Oprazadek, O-P-R-Z-A-D-E-K. I'll be real brief. But if our laws allow for a company like QUASAR with their reputation to come in to do this sort of thing in our community, I ask you, I challenge you, and I demand you as the EPA and a government agency to look back into these outdated laws from the 90s and to do something about it, because this is not okay. I understand the things that you cannot do that are outside your jurisdiction, but I think from what people are saying here today, these federal regulations that have nothing to do with Preston, Ohio, need to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do I see anyone else? Yes, please come forward. Yes, ma'am.
I can't walk. I'm disabled.
Okay, let me bring the microphone to you though.
I'll get it for
Thank you.
I'm going to get it for you.
If you'll just state and spell your name for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Deb Davis, D-A-V-I-S. I've been for 59 years a resident of Wayne County, and so is my family, like many others, through the generations. I'm a farmer's daughter, a dairy farmer. I agree with everything these people said. Everybody's upset about the smell. Everybody's upset about the land values. Everybody's upset about the sludge that's going to run off the roads and off the gravel pit into the creeks. You got to worry about other things too, because they're not able to take care of this now. There's no law. These people aren't at fault. They're doing their job, like everybody said. But the problem is that down the road things happen. And yes, you, just like any lawyer, is not going to do anything until after something happens and you can react to it instead of being proactive. Camp Lejeune was a Marine Corps base. It still is. 246 square miles down in North Carolina, Jacksonville, I think. There was a dry cleaners beside there, and there's wells on that 246 square miles. And those wells were contaminated, especially the ones that were in closest vicinity and beside it. That was in 1936 to 1984 approximately, and now people are wondering why for the last 30, 40 years their children, there was miscarriages. The women had miscarriages only in the families that lived in that Marine Corps. And the families that had children, they're all deformed in some way. They have some kind of disability. I had a girl that worked by my side as a companion aide, and she was disabled, and her children are all disabled, 3 boys from different husbands. And yet her family didn't know why her mom had so many miscarriages. This is one of many families. There was a lawsuit way back when, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and now the military sends letters out to these people to help pay for their medical expenses. There were a lot of deaths. There's a lot of disabilities. So down the road, even if nobody does anything now for the smell that irritates us, for the odors, for walking on the road and it transfers onto your wheels, on a wheelchair, or on your bicycle, or on a horse. You know, there's sludge everywhere. It's all over Wayne County. When you see a sign that says this is an agriculture department, blah, 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 code whatever, and there's a new development across the street, that's the problem. Because they come down here from all over building new houses, and just like this other lady that moved down here, you expect to be in the country and live the benefits of the country. But this is going to affect us for a long time. We all know, and you all know, that they've got a bad track record, QUASAR. It's anywhere you look on the internet, you can bring up hundreds of violations, and they've never paid a cent, like they said. But it's not about that. Yeah, people are making money, but money doesn't solve our problem right now. It's not the money. It's about everybody going and having people in government protect us, just like the EPA is supposed to protect us. You four are doing your job. Thank you for coming and letting people speak. I didn't know this was going to happen, or I would have prepared something that was more appropriate. But just like this Camp Lejeune, this is a disaster. And it's a worldwide problem. It's not just around Wayne County, but yeah, we're a dumping site. Because there's certain people who are greedy that only care about money, no matter how nice they are, no matter how good their children are. But people care more about money than their health, because they're not going to be here. They're not thinking about their grandchildren or great-grandchildren or any of our families. And we don't want to leave, and where are we going to go when we're all sick, and when our children are sick, and our grandchildren are dying because we have no way to protect them now? Now you guys need to do something about it, not later when it happens, and everybody knows that. And there's a lot of people who aren't knowledgeable enough. They're smart people, but they're not knowledgeable enough to realize that in your documents you show 20% of this sludge is pig poop, okay? That's what it is. But 80% of it, you don't say where it comes from. QUASAR has been deceitful. They have lied to us. What is a lie? Is a lie where you just openly say something wrong, or is it something you leave out? That's a decision that everybody makes for themselves. But QUASAR has lied to us by leaving out all the important information. That's your job as the EPA to let us know what those 80% facts are. And what is effluent? I had to look it up, because even though I'm smart, I've lost a lot of brain power in the last few years on medications. Effluent doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's been processed. Processed byproducts from kitchens, from wastewater treatment plants. How often do you test that? Is it tested every load that goes out that QUASAR ships? And just like these other people said, are you ever going to know about what they take at midnight? And yeah, we already know. Just look at what happened in Ashland last year. It's been on the news. The same thing happened in Ashland. It snuck right in there. A lagoon was built in an open area, like you said, and all these problems 4 to 6 months later have already happened. People aren't dying yet, but they will, and they will everywhere, because it saves these guys billions, not millions, but billions of dollars, because they can't take and dump this crap anywhere else. It comes from industrial plants. It's toxic waste. Human waste is toxic. It is not processed properly. Effluent is processed waste. Doesn't say that it's processed properly. None of the statements say that it's processed legally, and it's not. It's already been proven by all these lawsuits that are already going on, but nobody cares because it's all money. And people that have money don't care because they still have more money and good lawyers. And we had a good lawyer here tonight. Thank you for saying what you did representing Canaan. That's where I grew up. Can you wrap up, ma'am? What I have to say is everything you said is right, all you people, but you know, you got to protect our future. You got to protect our children too. And this is going to drain down, just like she said, that little crawfish, yeah. It's already leaking all over the place, you know, before it's even built. So even though you say you can't, you did not answer the questions. You answered one question, and I don't know your names, I'm sorry. But all the questions that were asked, people were complaining out here and talking when you didn't want them to, because you weren't answering the question. You were beating around the bush, and you're dodging the questions. You should have been more prepared because that's who you are. You're paid to be prepared, and you know the questions, and you know the answers ahead of time.
Would you please wrap up, ma'am?
So thank you guys for coming, but everybody would appreciate you being more prepared the next time we have a hearing and a question and answer session. And this is not long enough for what's going on here. I didn't find out about it till the day after the meeting when I got out of the hospital. And I've been reading ever since, and everything you already know. You four are smart people, and you know the answers, and no, you would never move where Meadow Lake is, or where Lazy Bee Ranch is. You would never move to the Carmody Farm for this reason. But yet, you're doing your job, which is to protect. But you're not protecting us, you're protecting yourselves, and it's wrong. I'm just saying everybody needs to look out for more than what the eye sees or they can smell. And yeah, it is bad. All right. Thank you very much.
My name is Terry Smith, and I work here in the building. I'll have a quick statement. If you have any question about the smell,
please state it. You have to state and spell your name for the record.
Terry Smith, S-M-I-T-H, Terry with a Y. The only question I have, or comment, is if you have a comment about the smell, ask any bride who's used our arboretum in the last however many years since QUASAR's been here. It's kind of a joke to make sure that the wind is going the opposite way, or it's going to ruin her wedding day. Here in this building for 10 years, we've had events where people complain of the smell inside the auditorium. And we're what, maybe 3/4 of a mile from it? It still gets inside the building. So yeah, I don't have to live around it. Work around it is bad enough. So God bless all you people, and take it into consideration for them. But if you have any questions about the smell, I'm telling you, there's a lot of brides that would love to be here to let you know their good day was ruined.
Thank you, Chair. If you just state and spell your name, please.
Yes, my name is Barb, and the last name is Blau, B-L-O-U-G-H.
Excuse me, if you could keep the side conversations low, please. And Tom, you'll have to wait and speak on your own. I'm sorry. One at a time. Thank you.
Okay, my husband and I, we visited both. We saw 2 lagoons, one in Haviland and one in Cardington, Ohio. We did not go on the premises of the lagoon. We did not step on anybody's property. If we saw people out, walking about, we talked to them. We asked them, what do you think of the lagoon? They said to us, they put their head down, every one of them, and said, the smell is horrendous. Every one of them said it's a smell of garbage. They said it's like you live beside a dump all the time. They said we cannot have picnics, we cannot be out. One lady said she cannot hang her clothes out ever again because it's so bad. It's inside their homes. They had no indication these things were going in. Nobody let them know. They were told they were building another factory. That's what they were told. That town is devastated from it. People don't care anymore. They don't fix their homes up. One lady said, we can't, nobody will come in. We can't get out anymore. Nobody wants our homes anymore. We're done. Okay, so we went to the one in Cardington. Oh, that's a joke. It smells so bad, it is unbelievable. It's in your car, you can't stand it. It's the most unbelievable smell you've ever smelled in your life. It's like a dump that they put perfume in it. They dump palm gold in it to make the smell be better. Now you got hog poop in it. It's unbelievable. One lady said her dogs won't go out anymore because it's so bad. She said they bury their noses in the ground because they can't stand it. They come right back to the door because they want to come back in. The roads are deplorable down there. They need to go down there and check them out. County Road 159 is unbelievable. All the roads are torn up. I asked them, I said, where's your township? Why aren't they fixing these roads up? They said they gave up. There's no use of them coming in anymore. The roads are so bad. You can't even travel down them. The people say at nighttime, these trucks are traveling all night long. They said 2 o'clock in the morning, they're going down the road. Bangity, bangity, bangity. And he said they fly like idiots down through there. They said there's anywhere from 15 to 20 trucks a day on a normal day. On a heavy season, between 20 and 30 trucks. QUASAR does not tell the truth. When they say that QUASAR does not tell the truth, sorry to say, they do not. They turned around and told that Havilon, the people of Paulding, do not have a problem with the lagoon. Paulding is almost 9 miles up the road from Havilon. Now that's like going to Seville for us. Of course they're not going to have a problem with the lagoon in Paulding. Havilon is in Paulding County. That's how they got around that. That's how they kind of twist things the way they want to do. Now this is a company that you want to have anything to do with. We don't want anything to do with them. So I'm just saying that we've seen these lagoons. We've seen what's happened to the area. It's devastating what they do to the area, and that's what's going to happen to our area. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking, Barb. Tom.
My name is Tom Blau, B-L-O-U-G-H, and my wife and Barbara, who has just spoken to you. We've lived on our property for 37 years on Pleasant Home Road. I implore each and every individual here, you don't have to take our word for this. Take a trip out to these 2 areas. Witness this by yourself. Smell the smells. Talk to the people. Drive the roads. See the despair in their faces as they face.
Why don't they?
Excuse me, ma'am. Please let him speak without interrupting.
Yeah.
Please stop. You are in America and you can speak and take your own turn, please. Tom, please continue.
Yeah.
Tom, please continue.
I wish that every one of you could have seen the despair in these people's faces as they face the losses and the devastation that these things have wreaked upon them. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for me. Another thing I would like to say, if this lagoon goes in, QUASAR will seek another area to put their lagoon. What they did up here was they tried to hit a home run. They've contacted other people in the area and said, no, we don't want you here. We don't need you here. There are reasons why we don't want you here. There was a perfect marriage between QUASAR and the WILES family. When they came together, a perfect marriage, okay? What's going to happen there is it's just deplorable. What's going to happen is sooner or later, there's going to be a breach in one of these lagoons. That clay liner is going to give way, and there's going to be a catastrophic event happen. When the regional water or just local water is polluted, contaminated, you can't use your water. It goes out 5 to 10 miles, shuts our dairy farm operations down. These people want to wait until that happens. Not do something now, not do something preventive now. They want to wait till it happens and said, why didn't we do something? We had opportunities. They cannot guarantee you that this is not going to happen. The possibility is real. It exists. Stand up and fight. Don't give up. Get everybody behind you as you can to try to fight that this is a despicable thing that's being put upon you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Ma'am, I invite you to come and speak if you'd like. Okay. If you want to come up and speak, please, if you'll state your name for the record, we'd be glad to hear you. Please, if you just come up and speak, Ms. Williams, thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate you doing this. If you'll state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Yvonne Woody. I'm an implant in Ohio, but I've lived here for almost 59 years. And I love it. I love my neighbors and I love my property. And I live on Pleasant Home Road. And I wanted to live my life out there, but I don't think I'm going to get to. Not if they let this in. Now, I sat here and I listened to these people. And Wayne County must have smallpox because everything is allowed in. And you can't keep smallpox out. And it's just like having it. And I don't know who all is supposed to look out for us, but I know the EPA does not.
All right, thank you for speaking, ma'am. Okay. Ma'am, please state your name and spell it for the record.
I'm Evelyn Robinson, R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N. Everyone's pretty much covered everything that I was thinking. I didn't come down. I thought I wouldn't shut up. I'm going to tell you this real short. I want you people to know.
Please face toward us, ma'am, so we can hear you.
We have a wonderful attorney. We need donations. You can purchase signs, $10 a piece for what they do. It shows that our community is sticking together. Please contact Kelly Miller, and she can give you more information. And please buy the signs and donate money. We've got to pay attorneys. They don't work for nothing. He's good. He stopped one of these in Medina County, and he can do it here in Wayne County. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Are you going to?
Mark Christopherson, C-H-R-I-S-T-O-P-H-E-R-S-O-N. I'm a student here at ATI, and I'm going to capitalize on what Terry had to say. You can smell it from the apartment villages. This one down right out here. It is, All right, can y'all hear me now? I'm going to capitalize on what Terry had to say. You can smell it from the village when the wind is blowing the right way. It is horrible. No student or anybody should have to smell that. Whether it is or not, you shouldn't have to. Plain and simple. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Mark. Okay, I'm scanning the audience. If anyone else wants to provide testimony, please wave your hand so I can see it. Okay, I don't see anyone else. No, one time. That's the rule. I didn't create the rule, that's the rule. All right, so seeing that there are not further people who would like to provide testimony, I want to remind you that written comments will be accepted through the close of business April 24th, 2018. They are given the same weight as anything that was said here tonight. The time is now 8:18, and this hearing is concluded. Thank you for coming this evening.